When I was initially offered a review code for this game, I didn't really know what to expect. I mean, sure, I knew what type of game it was, but that doesn't always prepare you for what lies within. I have to admit that while this isn't exactly a mind-blowing masterpiece, I did find myself enjoying it far more than I'd imagined. I thought the story setup, while simplistic at first, was quite intriguing, and the visuals aren't bad either. The gameplay side of things is surprisingly solid and it works well, even though it's relegated to still images and menus. This is not a game with mass market appeal, but that's to be expected. It's been created for a specific audience, and I think the members of that audience should enjoy this one. So what is Lair Story? Well, it's a raising simulator presented in the style of a visual novel. It features different endings, story paths, decision making, and some light RPG elements. The original version of Lair Story was released on the PSP handheld console in 2007. It was later updated and ported to the PC in 2020. The version of the game that I'm reviewing here is the new Nintendo Switch port of that updated PC version. You play as Herald, a decorated warrior of the Great War with the monsters that decimated the city of Lairland. During the final days of that war, Herald launches an attack on the enemy stronghold. He eventually stumbles across an elevated altar and discovers a young girl upon it. Needless to say, he's quite confused by what he's found. She slowly awakens and gazes over the war-torn land. She begins to cry, utters a single word, and without warning erupts into a blinding light which seemingly removes all of the monsters from the world, saving the city and its people. Herald quickly realizes that the girl has no idea who she is, where she came from, or any understanding of humanity. However, considering that she's basically just saved the world, he decides to take her in, look after her, and teach her what it means to be human. That single word that she spoke was Chilia, and so that's what he decides to name her. The gameplay loop of Lair Story consists of you teaching and caring for Chilia over a 4-year time frame. Depending on the actions that you take, the things that you teach, and the way that her life goes, you'll unlock different endings and a branching story path. The narrative sections are, of course, presented to the player via the standard visual novel format. That said, this isn't just a visual novel. There's actually quite a few things that you can do in terms of gameplay mechanics. This screen is essentially the main menu, and it's from this menu that you decide how to proceed. At the top of the screen, you'll see what year it is, what season you're currently in, how much money you have on hand, and your MP reserves. MP works as a sort of magical currency in this game that needs to be spent in order to make certain choices. The bottom of the screen is where you make your selections. You've got status, prayers, items, ambience, schedule, and system, with more being unlocked as you progress. System is just the options menu where you can adjust the settings and save your game, but the other options pertain to Chilia herself. The status screen allows you to see every detail of Chilia's current form. There is a lot to see in this menu, but it basically shows her growth and progress within the various things that she's been learning. You could raise her to be a shop worker who ends up becoming a successful manager, a devout member of the church, or even something like a maid. There's quite a few options and it's all up to you. You can also see if she's exhausted and needs to rest or what her current mood is. All of the information exists here to allow you to make informed choices about what to do next and what's best for Chilia. Prayers are simply buffs that you can activate at the cost of MP. Items are specific objects that you collect as you play through the game. Some items that are found or purchased will just sit in your inventory and provide a passive bonus to Chilia, while some are equipable, like winter or summer clothes for her to wear during those seasons. You can also collect fabrics which can be crafted into clothes that can be worn for bonuses. Sometimes you'll be able to give consumable medicine items to Chilia in order to help her with exhaustion or to help with her mood. The ambience section allows you to decorate her room with a variety of furniture, fixtures, and fittings, all of which provide passive bonuses. The room that Chilia lives in at the beginning of the game isn't exactly comfortable. It's got random boxes laying around and has seemingly been used for storage. Over time, you'll be able to build up a nice selection of decorations which you can use to make it feel more inviting and homely. When you add or remove something from the room, it will actually show up in the background artwork. You can also raise or lower the amount of money that you want to spend on upkeep, but balance is key. If you don't spend enough, Chilia may feel uncomfortable, and if you spend too much, you won't have any cash left for anything else. The schedule is probably the most important option that you have. It's the section where Chilia's stats are affected the most, and it determines her path. It's also how you progress through the game and the story in general. There's 4 main options to choose from, which are study, work, rebuild, and other. Study is where you can teach Chilia various lessons in things like art, philosophy, faith, combat, and more. Each one of these lessons raises certain stats and costs a set amount of EVE, which is this game's main currency. It's also worth noting that the 3 lessons that you select take up 5 days each, and the same is true for anything else that you select like working, rebuilding, or resting. Selecting the work option will allow Chilia to work in a few different shops such as a seamstress or a beautician's. Sending Chilia to work will actually bring in money instead of spending it like studying does. As I said earlier, it's all about finding that balance. The rebuilding option is all about helping to physically rebuild the damaged city, putting up new walls, moving lumber around, and just generally helping to support the revitalization of Lairland. Lastly, the other option allows Chilia to rest, which recovers her exhaustion and relieves tension. I should also point out that you can in fact mix and match any of these options as you see fit. There are of course story events and narrative points that happen regardless of your choices, but at times you'll be able to send Chilia out on her own to explore the city. There's quite a few places to visit, including a shop where you can buy items, a tailor's where you can buy clothes, and a beautician's where you can change Chilia's hairstyle. As time passes in the game, her hair will even grow out within the same style. As you can see here, I changed her haircut early on to these pigtails, but later on, it actually grew out while retaining the pigtail style. There's also a lot of areas that aren't used for any one specific thing, at least in the beginning of the game. You can visit places like the bathhouse, the streets, and the bar very early on, but not much will happen there unless you've triggered a certain event. And outside of a few options that you can unlock later in the game, the endings and the story, which I won't be spoiling here, that's about it for what you need to know. The game's available right now on the Nintendo Switch and PC via download, but there is no physical copy available at the time of this review. So what are my personal views on the game? Well, I've said this before, but I do enjoy a good visual novel from time to time. I don't generally play my Nintendo Switch in handheld mode, I actually use it in TV mode maybe 90% of the time, but this game isn't gameplay intensive at all, so I'm happy to just sit down on the sofa and relax with it. I find it's quite nice to dim the lights, make a tea or coffee, and just enjoy something like this. It's also pretty fun to stick a movie on that you've seen a million times and just have it there in the background. I mean, you can put this game down at any time and nothing will actually happen unless you press a button, so it really is perfect for it. For those of you who might be wondering, I watched the 1993 action movie Demolition Man on one night and the second Ace Ventura movie on another, so, make of that what you will. I can't really go into too much detail in terms of what I liked because A, spoilers, and B, there really isn't that much to the game in general. I guess I can say that I like the direction of the narrative and the theme behind it all. I think Chilia is a great character, and as I said in the main review section, her responses and events seem quite lifelike. It's all scripted stuff, it's not like I was talking to an AI or anything like that, but it felt like she was saying things a person would actually say. After she got her hair cut, she was so excited and she wanted to know what I thought of it, and then, when her hair grew out, she wanted to know if I still liked it or if I preferred it shorter. And I know it's not a big deal, but little things like that here and there made her feel much more real. It just kind of helps you suspend your disbelief and get invested in her story, and I for one appreciate things like that. Visually, I think it's okay. I've played a lot of visual novels at this point, and something like Alcana, in my opinion, blows this game away in terms of graphics. That said, this is a slight remaster and port of a 2007 PSP game, so I think I can let it slide. It's not offensive or even bad really, it's just not that good, and that's fine by me in this instance. One thing I did notice throughout my time with the game is that the artistic vision does shine through. The in-game backgrounds, the overview of the town, the character designs, and even the menus all have a good look to them, but it seems like the artists simply weren't seasoned professionals. And believe me when I say that it's not meant as an insult. I have a lot of ideas in my head for artwork due to the fact that I design and play my own trading card games in my spare time. Problem is, while I have the ideas and the creative vision clear as day in my head, I lack the skill to draw any of it myself. It's like trying to play a guitar solo when you haven't quite developed the technique yet. Having said that, I do think the artists that were involved in this game did a good job overall, and it's far better than anything I could personally create, so credit where credit is due. The only real negative that I came across was to do with the sound. It's nothing to do with the music though, the music's pretty good and definitely fits the scenarios that you find yourself in. No, it's actually to do with the voices. Now, I knew this wasn't going to have English dub, and that's fine by me, not everything has to have one. I've said this many times before, but I generally prefer an English dub in all cases when one's available, but I'm perfectly happy with Japanese voices and English subtitles in most cases. Once again though, that's not actually the issue. The issue is that they've recorded and or presented them at odd volume levels. At the start of the game, I found Chilia's voice to be at the correct volume, but then almost every other character had a different volume. One voice was so low that I couldn't hear it, and one was so loud that it was actually peaking and distorting. Thing is though, you can't really do anything about it. You can't turn the volume up to hear the quiet one because the louder one becomes unbearable, and you can't turn the volume down on the loud one because you won't hear the quiet one at all. I checked the menus and the options, and the only thing that I could do was turn the volume off completely, which is a bit of a shame. Being honest and realistic, it did not ruin the game for me. After a while I got used to it and kind of forgot it even had voices because, I'd already turned them off, but I did think it was worth mentioning. In my opinion, Lair Land Story is a well-made and engrossing racing sim with decent visuals and a notably interesting story. I think the mechanics are good and it is easy to understand, but it's still got enough going on that I never felt like a bystander. I felt like my input actually mattered, and the responses you get from Chilia felt pretty lifelike, which is what you want in a sim like this. Ultimately, as I said at the beginning, this is once again a niche game for a niche audience. Lair Land Story isn't going to be a similar situation to Persona 5 or Tales of Arise, two games that truly brought their franchises out of relative obscurity. If you don't actually like visual novels or racing sims, this is most likely not going to convince you otherwise. That said, for fans of the genre, this does seem like a good one to me, and I don't think you'll be disappointed if you decide to pick it up. If you enjoy the video, I really hope you'll consider subscribing, and if you like what I do and want to help support the channel, please check out the first link in the video description down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.